All right, good morning. It's Coffee and Chat with Rev Bruce. Once again, taking this up and getting started. Today we're talking about some tips for nonprofits to secure more funding and how to do that immediately. And I want to make sure we understand that this particular approach is still connected to what we're talking about as far as inspiration, because this is one of those things as far as implementation that helps us help those that do good and that are connected to working and supporting good causes. And so a lot of what goes into that can't happen without someone behind the scenes or on the granular level working and doing some things to put these grants together either as a team or as an individual, executive director, whatever it may be, trying to make it happen so that organizations can get the funding that they need to perform and implement the programs that they have set for the participants that they help out. So God bless it with that. Let's make this happen and let's do it in an orderly fashion. We're talking about three particular tips, and I want to address that because, as you can see, the stats are real. 80%, 80% of grant applications to local foundations are rejected. 80%. And so just taking that number, right, and going into grant writing mode, just taking that number and looking at it and saying, okay, 80% are rejected. That means competitively, what puts me ahead of the pack? How can I get ahead of the pack? How can I get ahead of the rest of the herd in submitting my grant application? And we got to look at the reasons that they're rejected. We got to look at the reasons that they're rejected. And on the flip side of that, 80% are rejected. And then 30% is the average rate of return on grant writing. And so you'll get about 30% of what you submit funded when you're grant writing. And so you're chunking out, let's say you chunk out 10 grants, 3 of those might get funded. And so let's just be real. 3 of those might get funded based upon the numbers. And so that's why it's great to have a high percentage in the pipeline and then some more that are being worked on and some more that are being, you know, navigated, I'll say, right? There's some relationship building that needs to happen with grant writing and some other things that a lot of people are not ready for the dog and pony show. They just want to submit it and move on because they're in the grind of the day-to-day work. And so 80% are rejected. 30% is the average approval rate based upon um, those that you submit. Like 30% of your grants will probably get funded. So think about it. Look at the reasons why most grants get rejected. They don't match the funding priorities. Funding priorities are the guidelines that are provided when you get grant notifications. They say these grants are for these type of initiatives. These grants are for this type of programming. And so if you're doing something with homeless veterans that has to deal with food insecurity and things of that nature, that's not an educational or arts program. So what are you doing applying for that grant? That it doesn't match the funding priority. And so that's what they're talking about. When you try to squeeze in a youth gang diversion program under education and arts, you better have education and arts attached to it. Otherwise, you don't match the funding priorities. All youth programs aren't educational and arts programs. So let's keep that in mind. Even though gang diversion is a good thing to have for youth, in particular in certain municipalities, urban settings, but wait a minute, that doesn't match with what they're funding. And if it doesn't match with what they're funding, yours is going to get set aside or thrown into the circular file or just shredded, not even paid attention. Here we go. So you gotta find out what they're funding and find a match for what you're doing. That's what you need to do. Number two, they fail to follow the guidelines. If they say Arial font, 12 point, double spaced, that's what you need to do. You need to use Arial font. So what if you prefer something else, Times New Roman? Okay, big deal. But what they want on their grant applications is Arial font, 12 point, double space. That's what you need to change your settings to in order to conduct and complete this proposal, right? It's almost like saying SAT, you get so many points for just putting your name correctly in the right place. You know what I mean? If we just follow directions and make the right connection, we're 2/3 of beating half the pack. You understand what I mean? Right there. Find the right funding and follow the directions, and you're beating the pack. Now, here's the part that I'm going to get into later once we get past these 3 tips as a bonus. But here's the part that you got to understand. Most grant proposals are also rejected because they're poorly written. They're a poorly written proposal. There's no argument. There's no case statement. There are no stats and data to support as evidence what the proposal is talking about. There's no program design involved in there, right? There's no input and outputs and outcomes. There's no evaluation attached to this program. The budget doesn't match the program, and the budget isn't feasible for this type of program. What in the world did they put together, right? And so they're poorly written, they're poorly packaged, it doesn't go together, it doesn't fit together. Come on. That's most grant proposals that get it. And I can say it, I've been on both sides. I've been on the side of submitting it, and I've been on the side of reviewing grants. And as a grant professional, if you get a chance to get on a committee and review grants, whether you're helping out a local foundation or you're doing something else, take that opportunity, see it from the other side, see what they're going through, find out what they're talking about in that room and see, okay, this is what they were talking about when they're reviewing my stuff. Okay, cool. You'll have a different perspective when you walk out. And so here are 3 ways, right? Here are 3 ways to combat that and get more grant funding. Number 1, find a funding match via grant research. Find a funding match via grant research. Most people don't want to spend the time to research grants. I think the Foundation Center has been one of the biggest assets in researching grants. And I think I like what they have online. A lot of people have grant writing newsletters where they'll tell you like which announcements are coming out. The government does a great job of having its announcements come out. And I think by departments, I would have to say um, Health and Human Services definitely um, has always been great. But one of the biggest departments that is good will always be grants.gov. Okay. And then from there, you want to look at, I look at juvenile justice. So I look at the justice website, and that has a lot of information on it. I look at a lot of things that are related to youth development and after school. And all of that is great as far as the pages and the announcements and funding. The problem is, I also recognize everything isn't for the programs that I'm searching for. So that's where I am able to tailor and narrow my searches and my research time. Can you use AI for this? Yeah, great. But you're still going to have to check it out and see, okay, after I've searched it for with AI, now am I able to narrow that search and fine tune it to the best matches, right? And I would say tailor your informative questions to AI to the specifics of the type of program you are and what points you hit. And we'll do another session on that later on because I do use some aspects of, AI in my initial searches. So you got to find funding that matches via grant research. Second, you've got to review, right? Review the grant guidelines and do it as a team, do it as a fundraising team, and break out a whiteboard or some yellow legal pads and share or create a Google Doc and share what you're finding as you're reading the guidelines. Hey, we need to have this on recycled paper. Oh man, do you realize they only accept this via FedEx? Come on, look at the guidelines and see what they're saying. Because everyone's not doing it the same way. Some of these foundations only meet once a year, twice a year. Some meet quarterly. And so they only have so much time to review and accept or reject these grants. So if you're out of line with what they're asking for, you're getting put aside immediately because they just don't have the time. It's not there. It's not available. And so keep that in mind. Review grant guidelines as a fundraising team and come up with some short notes and a summary, a profile of what is this grant requiring you to do. Get it? Hope you got it. Now check this out. On the third point, you need to write and review grant proposals as a fundraising team, right? The last two I said as a fundraising team, right? And I say that because you may be able to write and put together the argument, the need statement, the case statement, and come up with, some solid goals to reach as a program, who you want to touch, who you want to help, how you want to help them, what do you want to see at the end of the road, right? You may be able to write that part. And you may need your other person that's more of a research person to say, hey, here are the stats that go along with that. And if we look at it, the trend is a 40% improvement rate is unrealistic. We need to say we'll improve the situation year one by 25%. And if they continue and we retain them in the program, we'll be able to reach 40% that you want down the road by year two, if not year three. That's what you need in that proposal review and writing, because you may have something that's unrealistic that sounds great to you, but it's unrealistic to your numbers people. Talk about your budget. That's another thing where when it talks about being poorly written, the budget doesn't match up. The budget stinks. And so here we go. If the budget is sad, right, then what we're getting is a program that's not matching up with what should be delivered. And so the budget needs to contain all of the elements of the program, and it needs to account for everything that it takes to run the program, whether that stuff is sponsored or donated, or it is coming in the form of in-kind goods or services. It needs to be accounted for in the budget, and from there, it can be reviewed with your finance person. And your finance person can say, no. When it comes to this type of program, we need to measure it by FTEs, the full-time equivalents, as far as employees. And so if someone isn't totally dedicated to this program, are they, 0.25% FTE, or are they 0.5% FTE, right? And so those types of questions come out as you review these budgets, these proposals together as a fundraising team. So it's not just crank out proposal upon proposal and use a boilerplate and a template that you got from, some other program. No. You got to make sure that it matches what the funder wants, and you got to make sure that it meets the criteria for being something that's feasible and fundable, right? It has to be feasible and it has to be fundable, right? And when I say fundable, like that people will put money towards it. People will put money and give towards that program being implemented. Here it goes. Those are 3 tips. But hold on, I've got more for you. Don't get scared about, I don't have what it takes to write it. Listen, if you can write a solid thesis paper with a persuasive argument and supportive evidence, then you can write a grant proposal. You got enough to get started. You can learn the ins and outs, the nuts and bolts later, but you've got enough to get started. For those that have been writing grants and it seems like what you're doing has hit a rut, or you're not there where you used to be anymore, think differently about writing your grants. What am I saying? Think more creatively. What does that mean? Get outside the box, beyond the norm. Think more creatively. Let your imagination come up with some new innovations, right? Let your imagination give you some new inspiration. Boom. Think more conceptually. Think in the form of concepts. Let's take it like this. When we cook, we not only need the ingredients, right? But we need the functions that occur in order to combine those ingredients to give us what we want to eat. And so when we're cooking, we're combining those ingredients, right? Those elements, components of the program, we're combining them with functions. What do? How do they work together in order to come out with this finished product, a baked good or a souffle of a dish, right? Amazing. Think conceptually. And then think more connectively. Think more connectively. How do these things connect to one another? Stats and data, that they're not relevant until we put them together with the story of somebody's life experience. The stats, that they're meaningless until we put them together with how someone's life can be changed and how this can be no longer an issue, but it can be disrupted before it becomes an epidemic. It can be broken down and dismantled before it becomes a crisis, right? Before all of this breaks loose and turns into something that we cannot fix, let's look at it from the perspective of how do we connect the dots in order to build a bridge to get folks to a safer place. That's all we're talking about here. And so if we can do it differently, and we can go back to the three things that are simple changes, right? Simple changes, we can get ahead of the pack. What do we need to do? We need to find a funding match via grant research. There's thousands of grants out there. All of them don't fit you. If you can find, the 15, 20 that are a good fit, focus on them. Focus on the good fit and the best fit, right? Review the grant guidelines as a fundraising team. They all may not be due at the same time. Some of them have rolling deadlines. Some of them have once a year, an annual deadline. Some of them have quarterly deadlines. Some of them have biannual deadlines. Whatever it may be, get your calendar together and identify where these deadlines fall for your top picks and put them on a calendar so you can see, okay, you know what? We need to prepare for the end of January, writing this one that's due mid-February because we need this turned in on time and ready to go so it's both feasible and fundable. And write and review those grant proposals as a fundraising team. Provide yourself enough time to write a solid proposal, review it, revise it, review it again, and make any other edits that may need to be in place, and then package it. Package it for delivery as required according to the deadline, the guidelines. Otherwise, you're going to be looking around and you're going to find yourself with a nice, solid proposal that still doesn't fit the guidelines because you sent it via U.S. mail and they only accept it by FedEx. Come on. You don't have to like the rules, you have to live with the rules. Get what I'm saying? And you may not like it, but you got to live with it. And living with it means you're able to accept that, okay, this is how they accept it. Let me go ahead and get things set up with FedEx for a delivery of this package to this company. That's all we're talking about. That's all we're saying. And that's all we're doing. Hope everybody gets it. Hope everybody understands it and that it makes sense to you as we're doing this. God bless.